The first thing Admiral Zextar noticed about the human sector was the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of empty space, but something far more unsettling. The complete absence of any electromagnetic signals, quantum communications, or even basic navigation beacons that should have filled the void around any civilized territory. His flagship, the Dominion's Fist, led a fleet of 800 vessels toward what the Galactic Council had designated as Sector 7749 Alpha, what humans called their home territories. 3 months had passed since the Council's declaration of war against the human species, and this was to be the final push that would end their resistance once and for all. The war had been inevitable, really. Humans had burst onto the galactic scene only 50 years ago, claiming 17 star systems as their sovereign territory. Most species took centuries to expand beyond their home system, but humans seemed to multiply and spread like some sort of biological plague. Worse still, they refused to submit to the Council's authority or accept their assigned place as a developing species subject to the guidance of their betters. The Vrex Empire had been the first to test human resolve, sending a small fleet to claim one of their outer colonies. The entire force had vanished without a trace. No distress signals, no debris, nothing. The humans simply announced that the Vrex fleet had violated human space and that appropriate measures had been taken. When pressed for details, the human ambassador had smiled that unsettling expression they called a grin and said, "We'd prefer if everyone just stayed out of our territory. For everyone's safety." The arrogance had been breathtaking. A species barely off their home planet, warning the great powers of the galaxy about safety. The Council had demanded the return of the Vrex ships and crews. The humans had replied that this was not possible and again suggested that all alien vessels avoid human space. The second incident had involved a Corvani trade convoy that had taken a shortcut through human territory. Like the Vrex fleet, they had simply disappeared. The humans claimed they had never detected any such convoy, but offered to investigate if the Council provided the ship's last known coordinates and full manifest details. That had been the final insult. Clearly, the humans were destroying any ship that entered their space and then pretending ignorance. The Council had voted unanimously for war. 17 star systems would be easy to conquer, especially when those systems belonged to such a young and obviously primitive species. The plan was simple: overwhelming force applied simultaneously across all human territories. 1,000 ships divided into 12 fleets would strike every human world at once. With no time to coordinate a defense, human resistance would crumble within days. Admiral Zextar commanded Fleet 7, tasked with the human homeworld they called Earth. Intelligence reports suggested it held nearly 12 billion humans and served as their capital. Securing it would likely end the war in a single decisive blow. But now, as they approached the edge of human space, something felt wrong. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Vex Nor from the communications station, "we're still not detecting any defensive positions. No orbital platforms, no patrol ships, not even communication satellites around the outer planets." Zextar frowned at the tactical display. His species, the Thrakkari, had built their reputation on military precision and overwhelming firepower. Their empire spanned 300 systems, and their fleets had never known defeat. But success had taught him to be cautious of the unexpected. "Sensor readings on the planets themselves?" he asked. "That's odd, sir. We can detect the planets, confirm they have suitable atmospheres and show signs of terraforming, but we can't get detailed surface scans." "Some kind of interference. Natural phenomena?" "Unknown, sir. The interference doesn't match any known atmospheric disturbance or magnetic field pattern." Captain Mordeth, his chief tactical officer, stepped forward. "Admiral, perhaps the humans have simply evacuated their outer territories. If they've concentrated their forces around their homeworld, it would explain the absence of defensive positions here." It was possible, Zextar supposed. A young species might well panic when faced with the combined might of the galactic powers. They might have pulled back to make their final stand at Earth. "Continue advance," he ordered. "But maintain full battle readiness. Something about this doesn't feel right." The fleet pressed deeper into human space, passing 3 star systems that showed the same pattern, planets that registered as inhabited but strangely shielded from detailed scanning, and absolutely no signs of space-based infrastructure or defenses. Sir, called out the sensor operator, we're approaching the fourth system. Initial scans show, wait, this is different. Report. I'm detecting what appears to be a single ship, sir. Small vessel, maybe frigate class. It's just sitting there in open space, not moving. Zexstar felt his combat instincts sharpen. Specifications? Unknown configuration. It doesn't match any design in our databases. Very strange readings, sir. The hull material doesn't seem to be metal. Life signs? Negative, sir. But the ship appears to be powered and operational. A ghost ship, then. Or perhaps some kind of automated probe. Put it on screen. The main viewer shifted to show a vessel unlike anything in Zexstar's considerable experience. It appeared to be grown rather than built, with smooth organic curves and a surface that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. No visible weapons, no obvious propulsion system, no clear entry points. Could it be some kind of biological entity? Asked Captain Mordef. Unknown. It's just sitting there. For several minutes, both fleets held position, studying each other across the void. Then, the alien ship began to move. It didn't accelerate gradually like any normal vessel. One moment it was stationary, the next it was somehow beside one of Zexstar's destroyers, moving at an impossible speed that should have torn apart anything made of normal matter. Red alert! Zexstar shouted. All ships, battle stations. But, even as the words left his mouth, he realized something was terribly wrong. The mysterious ship wasn't attacking. It was just observing. Moving from vessel to vessel in that impossible way, stopping for a few seconds beside each one as if examining them, then moving to the next. Sir, it's scanning us, reported the sensor operator, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. Deep scans, going right through our shields like they aren't even there. It's reading our ship's structure, our crew complement, everything. Fire on it, Zexstar ordered. Plasma cannons erupted from a dozen ships, filling space with deadly energy. The beams struck the organic vessel dead on, energy that could vaporize a battleship's armor in seconds. The ship absorbed the fire without any visible effect. No damage, sir. No shields detected, but somehow the weapons had no effect at all. The mysterious vessel completed its circuit of the fleet and returned to its original position. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Zexstar's communications board lit up with an incoming message. Put it through, he said grimly. The voice that emerged was clearly artificial, but with an unsettling quality that made Zexstar's hide crawl. It spoke in perfect Thrakari, though no human should have known their language. Attention unknown vessels. You have entered territory claimed by the human species. By the authority vested in me by the Terran Defense Compact, I am required to inform you that your presence here constitutes a violation of sovereign space. Please identify yourselves and state your business. Zexstar found his voice. This is Admiral Zexstar of the Galactic Council Fleet. We are here to claim these systems by right of conquest. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. A pause that seemed to stretch for eternity. I see. Please hold position while I consult with my supervisors regarding the appropriate response to your declaration. The transmission ended, leaving the fleet in ominous silence. Admiral, whispered Captain Mordef, what was that thing? Before Zexstar could answer, his sensor operator spoke up again, his voice now openly panicked. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Dozens of them, all appearing simultaneously. Where? Everywhere, sir. They're surrounding us. The tactical display updated, showing energy contacts materializing around the fleet in perfect formation. Ships, or at least ship-sized objects, emerging from what appeared to be empty space itself. How many? Zexstar asked, though he dreaded the answer. 200, no, 500, sir, the count keeps climbing. I'm reading over 1,000 contacts now, and more appearing every second. Through the viewport, space itself seemed to be tearing open, revealing vessels that hurt to look at directly. Not the clean technological lines of normal ships, but twisted, impossible geometries that seemed to fold space around themselves. Some appeared to be partially phased out of reality, existing in multiple dimensions at once. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "I'm receiving identical transmissions from all the other Council fleets." Zextar's blood ran cold. "All fleets?" "Yes, sir. Every fleet in every human system is reporting the same thing. They're all surrounded by unknown vessels that appeared from nowhere." The artificial voice spoke again, now coming from dozens of sources simultaneously, creating an effect that resonated through the ship's hull. "Admiral Zextar, I have received my instructions. The human government has reviewed your declaration of conquest and finds it inadequate. You will now receive a demonstration of why human space remains untouched." One of the nightmare ships moved toward the fleet. As it approached, reality seemed to warp around it, spacetime bending in ways that made Zextar's eyes water. When it reached the position of the destroyer Relentless Fury, it simply overlapped with the Thackeray vessel. For a moment, both ships occupied the same space, existing in some impossible state between dimensions. Then, the alien vessel withdrew, leaving behind something that had once been the Relentless Fury but was no longer quite the same. The destroyer's hull had been transformed into the same organic material as the mysterious ships. Its crew could be seen through the now translucent hull, but they were no longer moving. They stood frozen at their stations, faces locked in expressions of terror, somehow preserved but clearly no longer alive. What did you do to them?" Zextar demanded. "We translated them into a more stable configuration," the artificial voice replied with what might have been amusement. "They will serve as a monument to your visit. Your choice, Admiral, is simple: withdraw now and never return, or join them in their new state of existence." Around the fleet, 1,000 impossible ships waited with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. In the distance, Admiral Zextar could see more tiers in spacetime opening, revealing glimpses of what lay beyond human space, vast structures that belonged in no sane universe, geometries that suggested intelligence so far beyond galactic civilization that comparison was meaningless. "This is impossible," Captain Mordeth whispered. "How could they have developed such technology in only 50 years? The artificial voice answered as if it had heard him. "You misunderstand the timeline, Captain. Humans have been preparing for this moment for much longer than 50 years. What you call first contact was simply when we chose to announce our presence. We have been watching the galaxy for quite some time." "Watching?" Zextar found his voice again. "Learning. Studying. Deciding whether your species showed potential for growth or represented a threat to be contained. Most of you showed promise, which is why you have been allowed to continue your expansion unchecked. A few species, however." Images flashed on the fleet's screens, star systems that had gone silent over the centuries, civilizations that had simply vanished without explanation, mysteries that the Council had never been able to solve. "You," Admiral Zextar said, understanding flooding through him. "Indeed. Aggressive species who could not be reasoned with, who responded to contact with violence or demands for submission. They were relocated to ensure they could no longer threaten others." "Where?" "Elsewhere. The universe is vast, Admiral, and contains many places suitable for those who cannot coexist peacefully with their neighbors." The implications hit Zextar like a physical blow. Humans hadn't burst onto the galactic scene as a new species. They had been there all along, hidden and watching, powerful beyond imagination. What the galaxy had mistaken for rapid expansion was simply humans revealing what they had already claimed. "The missing ships," he began, "were safely transported to a neutral location and, their crews given the choice, live peacefully in a prepared habitat, or be relocated permanently to a dimension where they could harm no one. Most chose the former. We are not cruel, Admiral, merely thorough. What do you want from us?" "Nothing. We want you to leave our space and never return. We want the galactic community to continue developing along peaceful lines. We want to remain undisturbed while we pursue our own projects. These are not complex demands. And, if the Council refuses to accept this?" The pause that followed seemed to stretch across eternity. "Then, the galaxy will learn why, in all our centuries of observation, we have never found it necessary to ask permission for anything. The nightmare ships began to move in perfect synchronization, their impossible geometry shifting and flowing as they surrounded the fleet more completely. Through his instruments, Zextar could see similar movements around every Council fleet in human space, thousands of vessels that operated according to no physics he understood, commanded by intelligences that treated the fundamental forces of the universe as mere suggestions. "You have 30 minutes to begin your withdrawal," the artificial voice announced. "After that point, we will consider your presence a declaration of intent to join our collection of preserved examples." Zextar looked at his tactical officer, saw his own growing horror reflected in Captain Mordetha's eyes. 800 ships under his command, the finest vessels in the Thackeray fleet, and they were as helpless as insects before these impossible guardians of human space. "Sir," his communications officer reported quietly, "I'm receiving withdrawal orders from Fleet Command. All Council fleets are ordered to retreat immediately." Of course they were. Every fleet in human space was seeing the same demonstration, facing the same impossible choice. The war was over before it had truly begun. "All ships," Zextar announced over the fleet comm, "prepare for immediate withdrawal. Set course for the Nexus." As his fleet began its retreat, Admiral Zextar found himself staring at the tactical display showing the impossible ships that watched their departure. Somewhere behind those vessels lay human space, 17 star systems that had never truly been threatened, protected by guardians whose mere existence rewrote everything the galaxy thought it knew about power and possibility. The last transmission from the artificial voice followed them as they fled. "Give our regards to the Galactic Council, Admiral. Tell them that human space remains untouched, and that this arrangement is in everyone's best interests." The transmission ended, leaving only the vast silence of space and the terrible knowledge that humanity had never been the young species they pretended to be. They were something far older and infinitely more dangerous, something that had been watching and judging the galaxy for centuries. As the human systems disappeared behind them, Admiral Zextar realized that the galaxy would never be the same. The balance of power hadn't shifted, it had been revealed to be an illusion all along. Knows true terror. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after what historians would later call the Great Withdrawal. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the vast amphitheater of Nexus Prime, their conversations creating a nervous buzz that filled the cavernous space with anxiety. Ambassador Kethral of the Vrex Empire stood at the central podium, his scaled features reflecting the stress that every delegate felt. The formal robes of office seemed to hang heavier on his shoulders as he called for order. "Fellow beings," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "we face a crisis unlike any in recorded galactic history. In the span of 72 hours, our understanding of the balance of power in this galaxy has been completely overturned." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The Corvani representative, her crystalline form catching and refracting the chamber's lights, stood to speak. "Ambassador Kethral, before we proceed, we must address the fundamental question: what exactly are we dealing with?" "That," said Admiral Zextar from the Military Observer Section, "is what we need to determine." The main display activated, showing tactical recordings from the human encounters. Even in replay, the impossible ships seemed to hurt the eye, their geometries defying normal perception. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably as the images played. "These vessels operate according to no known principles of physics," Admiral Zextar continued. "They appear and disappear at will, ignore our most powerful weapons, and demonstrate the ability to alter matter at a fundamental level." Senator Yixmoth of the Ancient Ethereal Collective raised one of his multiple appendages. "Admiral, in your assessment, how long would such technology have taken to develop?" "That's the problem, Senator. Based on what we observed, this level of technological advancement should require thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of years of focused research. But humans have only been known to galactic civilization for 50 years. Unless," interrupted Dr. Vashti, the Council's chief xenobiologist, "they've been developing in isolation for much longer than we assumed." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Representative Corval of the Trade Federation stood slowly, his voice carrying a tremor that betrayed his usual confidence. "Are you suggesting that humans have been in this galaxy for centuries, watching us, studying us, and we never detected them?" "The evidence suggests exactly that," Admiral Zextar replied grimly. "The artificial intelligence that spoke to us claimed they'd been observing the galaxy for quite some time. It also suggested that several missing civilizations over the centuries were their doing. A collective intake of breath rippled through the chamber. The harrowing of the Vexlani, the disappearance of the Morthal Empire, the sudden silence of the Krigoth systems, all unexplained mysteries that had puzzled galactic historians for generations. Ambassador Kethral gestured for order. If this is true, we must consider the possibility that humanity's technological capabilities far exceed our initial estimates. The question becomes, what are their intentions? They stated their intentions clearly, Admiral Zextar said. They want to be left alone. They want the galaxy to continue developing along peaceful lines, and they want to remain undisturbed while they pursue their own projects. And, if we refuse, asked the Corvani representative. The replay continued, showing the transformation of the Thrakkery destroyer, its crew preserved in eternal frozen terror. The chamber watched in horrified silence as the magnificent warship became something else entirely, a monument to power beyond comprehension. Then, Admiral Zextar said quietly, "We join their collection." Senator Yixmatha's ancient voice carried a weight of years. In my species' memory, which spans 12,000 years, we have encountered many mysteries. But nothing like this. The level of control over fundamental forces they displayed suggests not just advanced technology, but a complete mastery of reality itself. That's impossible, protested General Carthon of the Militant Coalition. No species can achieve such capabilities. There must be limits to what they can accomplish. General, Dr. Vashti interjected, "We thought there were limits to faster-than-light travel until we discovered quantum tunneling. We thought consciousness couldn't be transferred until the ethereal collective showed us otherwise. Perhaps our understanding of the possible is more limited than we assumed." Representative Morgeth from the Industrial Syndicate leaned forward. "The economic implications alone are staggering. If humans possess technology that can transform matter at will, manipulate spacetime, and create vessels that operate outside known physics, then every foundation of galactic commerce becomes meaningless." "Meaningless how?" asked the Trade Federation representative. "Consider, if they can create any element or material structure simply by willing it to exist, what value do our mining operations hold? If they can travel instantly between any 2 points in space, what purpose do our shipping lanes serve? If they can modify reality itself, what can we possibly offer them in trade?" The chamber erupted in worried conversations as delegates realized the scope of the challenge. This wasn't just a military threat, it was the potential obsolescence of their entire civilization. Ambassador Kethral called for order again. "These concerns, while valid, are premature. We must first establish communication with human leadership and attempt to understand their true intentions." "Assuming they have leadership in any sense we'd recognize," Admiral Zextar muttered. "The entity that spoke to us claimed to be consulting supervisors, but we have no idea what that means in human terms." Dr. Vashti accessed her datapad. "I've been reviewing all available intelligence on human society. What we know is remarkably limited, but it suggests a highly decentralized government structure they call a democratic federation. Multiple competing political parties, elected officials, complex bureaucratic systems. Standard political organization for a developing species," Senator Yixmoth noted. "But, if they've been active in the galaxy for centuries, why maintain such a primitive governmental structure?" "Perhaps," suggested Representative Corval, "it's not primitive at all. Perhaps it's a deliberate choice to maintain stability while pursuing long-term projects." The main display shifted to show intelligence reports gathered over the past 50 years. Population estimates, industrial capacity measurements, territorial expansion rates, all the standard data points used to assess a species' development. "According to our projections," Dr. Vashti continued, "humans should have a total population of approximately 40 billion across their 17 systems, with industrial capacity roughly equivalent to a mid-tier galactic power. But now we have to question whether any of this data is accurate." "You think they've been hiding their true capabilities all along?" asked the Corvani representative. "I think," Admiral Zextar said slowly, "that everything we thought we knew about humans is suspect. The 17 systems we believed comprised their territory might be a tiny fraction of their actual space. Their population could be in the trillions. Their industrial capacity could dwarf our combined civilizations. But why hide? General Carthon demanded. If they possess such overwhelming superiority, why not reveal themselves and demand whatever they want? Senator Yixmatha's ancient wisdom carried through his words. Perhaps because what they want is something that can't be taken by force. Peace, isolation, the freedom to pursue their own development without interference. These things require cooperation, not conquest. The chamber fell quiet as delegates contemplated this possibility. The idea that a species of such overwhelming power might genuinely desire only to be left alone was both reassuring and terrifying. There's another possibility we haven't considered, Dr. Vashti said hesitantly. What if humans aren't originally from this galaxy at all? The silence that followed was profound. Representative Morgeth was the first to speak. You're suggesting they're visitors? It would explain how they could develop such advanced technology without our detecting their civilization's growth. It would also explain their apparent lack of interest in conquest. If they're from elsewhere, they might view our conflicts as local disputes of no concern to them. Admiral Zextar shook his head. The artificial intelligence said they'd been observing us for centuries. That suggests a long-term presence here. Observers, Dr. Vashti repeated. Not necessarily natives. A sufficiently advanced civilization might well establish observation posts throughout the galaxy to monitor local development. Ambassador Kethral raised his hand. Speculation, while valuable, cannot guide policy. We need concrete information. I propose we attempt formal diplomatic contact with human leadership. How? Asked General Carthon. We don't even know if they have embassies or diplomatic protocols. Our previous attempts at contact have been through their border patrol, not their government. Then, we go through proper channels, the Vrex ambassador replied. We send an official diplomatic mission to their capital world, request a formal audience with their leadership, and attempt to establish normal relations. After declaring war on them? Admiral Zextar pointed out. After attempting to invade their territory with 1,000 ships? Especially after that. We need to make it clear that the Galactic Council recognizes the misunderstanding that led to recent events. The Ethereal Collective's Senator Yixmoth leaned forward. And if they refuse to meet with us? If they view any approach to their territory as a continuation of hostilities? Then, we face the possibility that we've made an enemy we cannot defeat, Ambassador Kethral said grimly. Representative Corval stood again. There's another consideration. If humans possess the technology we witnessed, and if they've been observing us for centuries, then they almost certainly have infiltrated our communications, our databases, our very societies. They may know everything about us while we know almost nothing about them. The paranoia that swept through the chamber was almost palpable. Delegates began looking at each other with newfound suspicion, wondering if their most secret conversations had been monitored, their most classified information already known to human observers. This session itself, whispered the Corvani representative, they might be watching right now. Dr. Vashti consulted her notes. Actually, that raises an interesting point. In all our encounters with humans over the past 50 years, have there been any instances where they demonstrated knowledge they shouldn't have possessed? A review of diplomatic records followed, conducted in hushed tones as delegates shared information they had previously considered routine. Gradually, a pattern emerged. Human negotiators who seemed unusually well informed about other species' internal politics. Trade discussions where humans appeared to know details about resource availability that hadn't been publicly released. Technological exchanges where humans offered solutions to problems that had only recently been discovered. By the ancient stars, Senator Yixmoth breathed, they have been watching us. All along. Which means, Admiral Zextar concluded, that our surprise attack was probably anticipated from the moment we began planning it. They allowed us to approach their territory. They let us see exactly as much as they wanted us to see. A demonstration, Ambassador Kethral realized. The entire encounter was designed to show us their capabilities without actually harming our forces. Mostly without harming our forces, the Admiral corrected, thinking of the transformed crew of the Relentless Fury. They made their point quite effectively. General Carthon slammed his fist on the table. So what do you propose? That we simply accept human superiority and submit to their wishes? I propose, Ambassador Kethral said carefully, that we recognize the reality of our situation. We are dealing with a civilization that could apparently destroy us all without significant effort, but has chosen not to. That suggests they might be willing to coexist peacefully if we respect their boundaries. And if they decide our boundaries need adjusting, the general demanded. Then, Senator Yixmoth said with the weight of eons behind his words, we negotiate. Because the alternative is extinction. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the full implications of their situation. For the first time in galactic history, they faced a species that didn't need anything they could offer, couldn't be threatened by any force they could assemble, and seemed content to ignore them entirely if left alone. I motion, Ambassador Kethral said formally, that the Galactic Council authorize a diplomatic mission to human space, with full authority to negotiate whatever agreements are necessary to ensure peaceful coexistence. The vote was unanimous. As delegates filed out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about the galaxy's new reality, none noticed the small device that had materialized briefly in the corner of the room, recorded the entire session, and vanished again without leaving any trace of its presence. Somewhere in human space, beings whose true nature remained hidden reviewed the recording and made notes about the galaxy's progress toward wisdom. The test had been passed, barely, but it was a beginning. The real question was whether galactic civilization could adapt quickly enough to the truth about their cosmic neighborhood, or whether more direct intervention would eventually become necessary. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Promise approached Earth with all the ceremony and caution that a formal first contact mission deserved. Ambassador Kethral stood on the bridge, watching humanity's homeworld grow larger on the viewscreen, and tried to calm the nervous tremor in his hands. 6 months had passed since the failed invasion, and the galaxy had spent that time in a state of barely contained anxiety. Trade routes had been rearranged to avoid human space entirely. Military patrols gave their territory a buffer zone of several light-years. The mere possibility of accidentally provoking another confrontation had paralyzed normal commerce and diplomacy. Ambassador, reported Captain Veltar from the pilot station, were receiving an approach vector from Earth traffic control. They're directing us to something called Luna Station for initial screening. Luna Station? Appears to be a facility in orbit around Earth's moon. I'm reading, substantial defensive capabilities, sir. More than anything we detected during our approach to human space. Ambassador Kethral nodded grimly. Of course there would be defenses. After what they'd witnessed at the border, he doubted anything in human space was left unguarded. Follow their instructions precisely, Captain. We cannot afford any misunderstandings. As they approached Luna Station, the scope of human engineering became apparent. The facility was enormous, easily the size of a small city, but built with the same organic curves and flowing lines they'd seen on the Guardian vessels. More unsettling was the way space seemed to bend slightly around it, creating optical distortions that hurt to look at directly. Sir, the communications officer called out, incoming transmission from the station. Put it through. The voice that emerged was distinctly human, carrying the same unsettling quality as the artificial intelligence they'd encountered at the border. Diplomatic vessel Harmony's Promise, welcome to the Sol System. I am Administrator Chan of Luna Station. We have been expecting you. Thank you, Administrator. I am Ambassador Kethral of the Galactic Council, here at the invitation of the human government to discuss formal diplomatic relations. A pause. Ambassador, before we proceed, I need to clarify something. Are you here as representatives of the political entity known as the Galactic Council, or are you here as representatives of the species that recently attempted to invade human territory? The careful distinction sent a chill through Kethral. We are here as representatives of the Council, seeking to establish peaceful relations and address any misunderstandings that may have occurred. I see. And, do you acknowledge that the recent military action against human space constituted an unprovoked act of aggression? Kethral felt sweat beating on his scales. The human was forcing him to admit fault publicly, on a recorded channel that could be used against the Council later. But, given the alternative. The Galactic Council acknowledges that recent actions were based on incomplete information and resulted in a regrettable misunderstanding. We seek to prevent any future incidents through proper diplomatic channels. Acceptable. You are cleared to dock at Bay 7. Please be advised that this station operates under human law and jurisdiction. Any violations will be dealt with accordingly. The docking process was eerily smooth, with human technology guiding their ship into position without any input from their pilot. As the bay doors sealed behind them, Ambassador Kethral realized they were now completely at human mercy. Administrator Chen met them at the airlock, and Kethral's first surprise was that he looked completely human. No visible cybernetic enhancements, no exotic modifications, just a middle-aged man in a simple uniform that somehow managed to convey immense authority. Ambassador Kethral, Chen said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "Welcome to Luna Station. I trust your journey was comfortable." "Very much so, Administrator. Though I confess some surprise at the conventional nature of this facility." "You were expecting something more exotic?" Chen's smile became genuine. "We find that visitors react better to familiar environments. Too much strangeness can be overwhelming." As they walked through the station's corridors, Kethral noted the careful balance between alien technology and conventional design. The walls flowed with organic curves, but the lighting and basic layout followed standard principles. Gravity felt normal, atmosphere was perfectly breathable for his species, even though he'd never provided biological data. "Administrator, if I may ask, how did you know the proper atmospheric mix for my delegation?" "We've been observing galactic civilization for some time, Ambassador. We have comprehensive biological databases for all known species." Another reminder of how thoroughly humanity had infiltrated galactic society without anyone noticing. Kethral filed the information away for his report. They entered a conference room that managed to be both impressive and comfortable. The table was clearly grown rather than built, its surface flowing seamlessly from the floor in a way that suggested matter manipulation on a molecular level. Windows provided a stunning view of Earth, the blue world hanging in space like a jewel. "Please, be seated," Chen said. "Can we offer you any refreshments?" "We have synthesizers capable of producing anything your species might find appealing." As Kethral's delegation settled around the table, he tried to maintain his diplomatic composure. "Administrator, I should mention that the Council has many questions about human technology and capabilities. The recent demonstration has raised concerns about the balance of power in the galaxy." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Understandable concerns. Though I should mention that what you witnessed at your border was hardly a demonstration of our full capabilities. More of a polite suggestion that you reconsider your approach." "A polite suggestion?" Dr. Vashti, who had insisted on joining the diplomatic mission, leaned forward. "You transformed one of our ships and its crew into some kind of monument." "The crew of the Relentless Fury is perfectly safe," Chen replied calmly. "They exist in a stable quantum state that preserves their consciousness while preventing any possibility of harm. Think of it as a very advanced form of suspended animation." "Can they be restored?" "Of course. We're not monsters, Doctor. We simply needed to make a point about the futility of aggression against human space." Admiral Zextar, who had also joined the mission despite his obvious discomfort, spoke up. "Administrator, in all honesty, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Your technology appears to violate every known law of physics. Your ships operate according to principles we can't even begin to comprehend. Are you going to explain how this is possible?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Admiral, let me ask you a question. If you encountered a species that was still discovering fire, would you attempt to explain quantum mechanics to them?" No, of course not. They wouldn't have the foundation to understand." "Precisely. Now, I don't mean to imply that your civilizations are primitive. You've achieved remarkable things within the parameters of your current understanding. But there are aspects of reality that require a fundamentally different perspective to grasp." Dr. Vashti pulled out her datapad. "Are you saying we lack the intellectual capacity to understand your technology?" "Not at all. I'm saying you lack the conceptual framework. For example, you think of matter and energy as separate phenomena, when they're actually different expressions of the same underlying reality. You view consciousness as an emergent property of complex neural networks, when it's actually a fundamental force that shapes reality at the quantum level. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ambassador Kethral found his voice first. You're talking about manipulating reality through directed consciousness. That's a crude but not entirely inaccurate description. Though manipulation implies force, we prefer to think of it as collaboration with the universe's natural tendency toward complexity and order. Admiral Zextar shook his head. Even if such things were possible, the level of discipline and training required would be enormous. How could an entire species master such abilities? Shen's expression became thoughtful. Admiral, how long do you think humans have been developing these capabilities? Based on what we've observed. Centuries, at minimum. Possibly millennia. Try millions of years. The silence that followed was profound. Dr. Vashti was the first to recover. Millions? But Earth shows clear signs of recent industrial development. Your civilization couldn't be more than a few thousand years old. Earth's current human civilization is indeed relatively young, Shen agreed. But humanity as a species is much older than your archaeological evidence suggests. We've been through several cycles of development and transcendence. Transcendence? Ambassador Kethral asked. The process of moving beyond purely physical existence. Most of humanity now exists in what you might think of as a higher dimensional space. What you see as our population is essentially a caretaker force maintaining watch over our birth world and monitoring local galactic development. The magnitude of this revelation hit the delegation like a physical blow. They weren't dealing with an advanced civilization, they were dealing with the remnants of something that had evolved beyond the need for physical existence entirely. So when you say you've been observing the galaxy, Dr. Vashti began. We mean we've been watching the development of younger species, guiding when necessary, intervening when threats become too severe. The universe is vast, Doctor, and full of wonders. But it's also full of dangers. Species that develop along certain paths can become threats not just to their neighbors, but to reality itself. Admiral Zextar leaned back in his chair. And you've designated yourselves the guardians against such threats. Not designated. We simply accepted the responsibility that comes with capability. When you can reshape reality with a thought, when you can travel between dimensions as easily as walking across a room, when you can perceive the fundamental structures that hold the universe together, certain obligations become apparent. Ambassador Kethral tried to process this information. The missing civilizations. The ones that disappeared over the centuries. You relocated them. The ones that showed potential for destructive transcendence, yes. We moved them to pocket dimensions where they could develop safely without threatening others. Some eventually chose to join the greater community of transcendent species. Others preferred isolation. A few had to be contained permanently. And the galactic community? Dr. Vashti asked. What's our fate? Shin smiled, and, for the first time, it seemed completely genuine. Doctor, your species and your allies have shown remarkable progress toward wisdom and cooperation. The fact that you're here, seeking diplomatic solutions instead of planning revenge attacks, suggests that you have the potential to handle the truth responsibly. The truth being? That the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than any of your species currently imagine. That consciousness and reality are intertwined in ways that make almost anything possible. That there are paths of development that lead to godlike capabilities, and others that lead to mutual destruction. Administrator Chen stood and walked to the window, looking down at Earth. We've been debating for some time whether galactic civilization is ready to learn about these possibilities. The recent crisis forced our hand somewhat. Ambassador Kethral joined him at the window. And what have you decided? That depends largely on this conversation. Are you here as conquerors who have temporarily been forced to negotiate? Or are you here as representatives of species that genuinely want to learn and grow? The ambassador thought carefully before answering. Administrator, I think I speak for all of us when I say that what we've learned today has fundamentally changed our perspective. We came here expecting to negotiate with a superior military power. Instead, we're speaking with beings who have transcended the very nature of existence as we understand it. And how does that make you feel? Terrified, Kethral admitted. But, also, hopeful. If such transcendence is possible, if consciousness can truly reshape reality, then, perhaps our species have futures we never dared imagine. Chen nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of perspective that suggests readiness for the next phase of development. Dr. Vashti looked up from her notes. What would that involve? Gradual introduction to expanded concepts of reality. Careful guidance in developing new technologies that work with universal forces rather than against them. Eventually, if your species choose that path, preparation for your own transcendence. Admiral Zextar shook his head in wonder. You're offering to teach us to become like you. Not like us, Admiral. Like yourselves, but more than you currently imagine possible. Each species that achieves transcendence does so in its own unique way, developing capabilities that reflect their particular strengths and perspectives. And, if we refuse? Ambassador Kethral asked. Then, you continue developing as you have been, and we continue watching discreetly from the sidelines. Free will is paramount in these matters. Transcendence cannot be forced, it must be chosen freely and pursued with complete dedication. The room fell quiet as the delegation absorbed the implications. They had come expecting negotiations about territory and trade agreements. Instead, they were being offered the possibility of evolutionary leaps that would reshape their entire understanding of existence. Administrator, Dr. Vashti said finally, this is far beyond the scope of what our governments empowered us to discuss. Of course. This conversation is preliminary, designed to gauge your species' readiness for expanded contact. If you choose to pursue this path, there will be many more discussions, many more decisions to make. Chen returned to the table. For now, let's address the immediate concerns that brought you here. The Galactic Council wants assurance that human space will remain stable and non-threatening to galactic civilization. Yes, Ambassador Kethral confirmed, grateful to return to more concrete matters. You have that assurance. Humanity has no interest in conquest or expansion beyond our current territories. We will continue our policy of non-interference in galactic affairs, provided that galactic affairs do not threaten the security of developing civilizations under our protection. Developing civilizations? Admiral Zextar asked. There are several species in your galaxy that show particular promise but aren't yet ready for contact with the broader community. We maintain discreet observation and protection protocols for them. Another reminder of how thoroughly humans had integrated themselves into galactic affairs without anyone realizing it. Ambassador Kethral made another mental note for his report. What about trade? Dr. Vashti asked. Economic cooperation? Difficult, given our technological disparity. We can synthesize any material substance at will, so traditional commerce holds little interest for us. However, we value information, artistic expression, and philosophical insights. Cultural exchange might be possible. And technology transfer? Chen considered this carefully. Certain basic improvements could be shared safely. More advanced capabilities would require extensive preparation and safeguards. As I mentioned earlier, some knowledge is dangerous without the proper context. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering the basic framework for what would become the most significant treaty in galactic history. Humanity would maintain its current borders and non-interference policies. The galactic community would respect human sovereignty and accept human guidance on matters involving transcendent technologies. As the delegation prepared to leave, Administrator Chen offered them one final insight. Ambassadors, I want you to understand something important. The reason human space remains untouched isn't just our defensive capabilities. It's because we've learned that true security comes from cooperation, not domination. The universe is vast enough for all consciousness to flourish, if we choose wisdom over fear. Ambassador Kethral paused at the airlock. Administrator, one final question. You mentioned that humanity has been through cycles of development and transcendence. What happened to cause those cycles? Chen's expression grew sad. The same thing that threatens every developing species, ambassador. The choice between wisdom and power, between growth and destruction. We learned eventually. The question is whether galactic civilization can learn from our example, or whether you'll have to make the same mistakes we did. As the Harmony's Promise departed Luna Station, carrying news that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of itself, Administrator Chen watched their ship disappear into the void. Behind him, other figures materialized, beings whose forms shifted between human and something far more complex. Well, asked one of them, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond the physical. They're ready for the first phase, Chen replied. Scared, but curious. That's a good combination. And if they choose poorly? Chen's form began to shift as well, revealing the true nature that lay beneath his human appearance. Then, we guide them more directly. One way or another, this galaxy will learn to transcend its limitations. The universe has too much potential to waste on endless cycles of conflict and destruction. In the depths of space, human ships that existed partially outside normal reality continued their eternal vigil, protecting a galaxy that was slowly learning the first lesson of cosmic citizenship, that true terror wasn't found in superior weapons or advanced technology, but in the possibility of one's own unlimited potential.